it is 13 and a half hours long if you get the audiobook. And it's me speaking pretty quickly, and I would love to keep all of us here 13 and a half hours and really go into all this in depth, but as a vegan, I don't like to cause unnecessary suffering, so we won't do that, but I would like to, because there's, and actually the new book is even longer than this one, so you can say, over a few days. But the underlying idea, you all know this, I think, is that we human beings have been given this wonderful gift of a physical body that does not require any animals to be imprisoned and abused to get all of the nutrients that we need to celebrate our lives on this beautiful earth. How many of you have noticed by now that the earth is beautiful? Anyone figure that out? It's so, especially today. We were up in Eaton Canyon. It was so gorgeous. We took a swim in the stream coming down. There's so much beauty here. And the other thing about the earth being beautiful is, which we really need to understand, is that the earth is also enormously abundant. And just like Gandhi said, there's enough for everyone's need. There'll never be enough for everyone's greed. And the big problem with animal agriculture, really, among many others, is that it's just ridiculously wasteful of resources, of land, of water, of petroleum, and of lives. I mean, it's just wasting everything. Val and I lived in an RV for 17 years. We traveled all over North America, giving lectures and concerts, and so we've been in every state, many times, and really seen. And most of North America, and really the whole planet, has basically been reduced and enslaved to vast fields of genetically engineered feed grains for animals. Genetically engineered corn and soy and alfalfa, and it's just devastating to ecosystems. You have nature wants to create a whole orchestra of many species, and it's all monocropping. Anything besides the soy, any animals, plants, fungus, whatever, you kill it, kill. So that mentality is really the mentality of animal agriculture. The mentality of animal agriculture is the mentality to dominate and exploit nature and animals, and the sacred feminine dimension of life, which is really the foundation of everything that's healthy in nature and in our society. And so, how many of you have actually read the Ropey Style? Just so I have a feeling of, okay, so some of you have a lot, most of you haven't. All right, well, this book I think is really foundationally critical to understand what's happening in our world. And I was so glad after the Ropey Style came out, because the Ropey Style, basically, the idea I had was that we have this list of problems on planet Earth that everybody agrees on. We have war and conflict and injustice and disease and environmental devastation, this whole list of problems, and we're all working to try to solve these problems. And on that list, everybody agrees, is another problem, which is human abuse of animals. But everybody agrees that that's a problem, but it's very low on the list, because we're humans, we're much more important than they are. So after we solve all our problems, then we'll go ahead and we'll look at the animal problem. And so I wrote the Ropey Style basically to take animal abuse and take it from the bottom of the list and put it at the very top of the list. That's where it really belongs, because not only it is the most severe and massive suffering you can imagine, I mean, it's just beyond imagining. But besides that, if you look carefully, every single problem that we have is being driven by the practice in the outer world and the mentality required by animal agriculture. Animal agriculture drives all these problems. It drives the injustice, the environmental devastation, the disease, the war, the conflict, the world hunger. It's all driven by this wasteful system that dominates animals, that pollutes relentlessly the oceans, the rivers, the prairies, the cutting down rainforests, just really laying waste to genetic diversity and causing just massive environmental devastation, destruction of not only of ecosystems, but of indigenous populations, and then funneling huge amounts of money into a tiny globalist plutocrat group of people that thrive and make money on war and conflict and disease. And so the key thing I think to understand is that animal agriculture is the spinning fury at the core of our culture that no one really wants to look at. We just, no one wants to address that. And yet, once we start addressing it, we'll find our problems evaporating. I mean, we'll be able to really move forward in a positive direction. And so basic idea of animal agriculture being the underlying driving force has been repressed by really two main forces. One of the main forces is the whole corporate system, basically, the media and the medical establishment and the governmental agencies that are controlled by corporations and the financial institutions in the background. So all of them, if we look at this system, we go, it's terrible. I mean, it's destroying ecosystems, making everybody sick, causing war and conflict, causing hunger, which causes war and conflict. It's a crazy, terrible system. Why don't we change it? Well, look, it's working very well for this tiny plutocratic elite that makes money and all that stuff. So it's working very well for them. So that's one of the reasons it's hard to change. But the other main reason it's hard to change is that most people do not want to change what they're eating. They just, and that's one of the main reasons I wrote this, was to kind of delve deeper into why is it that when we share these ideas with our friends and neighbors and relatives and say how much better it is for our environment, for our health, and for animals, and for spirituality and everything, they go, I like bacon. So it's not only the fact that people like bacon or like animal foods, that's part of it, but I think the main thing is that we bond and identify our relationships with other people and ourselves over the most important connection that we have with our society and nature, and that's food. Food is it. Food is, there's nothing more primary. I mean, the only thing that's maybe more difficult to disagree with the rest of the culture is language, right? Language, if I come along and say, as a little kid, I go, well, I'm not going to speak your language, I'm going to speak another language. It's not going to go very far. So we end up, if we're born in Spain, we speak Spanish. If we're born here, we speak English. But right behind that is food. To say I'm not going to eat your food, it's pretty much unthinkable, but at a tribal level. So the problem is that we've had this thing going for 10,000 years. I won't go into the whole history of it, but basically what happened 10,000 years ago, the herding revolution, was when, in what is today Iraq, people started to own certain animals for food as property, wild sheep, wild goats, later wild cows. And that initiated about 6 different things that happened, which we are now seeing devastating the world and our society. Number one, the animal status just dropped, because when you own a being, pretty soon you have to hurt them, you have to rape them, you have to kill them, you have to steal their babies, so you start to despise them. There's nothing worse you can say than to call someone a pig, a chicken, a turkey. So you had to lower their status. And then all the other animals that might interfere with our property, like the wild cats and the bobcats and the coyotes and the prairie dogs, they became pests. Got to get rid of them. We have the Department of Wildlife Services that kills millions of those animals every year that we pay for with our taxpayer money. So this whole system of animal abuse, and then the second thing was the arising of a wealthy, elite, tiny level of society, the super rich. That happened like 5, 6, 7,000 years ago. We had the arising of the kings. I used to teach college courses in these ancient texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Iliad and the Odyssey. You just read these ancient books and you can see it. There's these kings that are wealthy and powerful that dominate the entire culture because they own livestock. Livestock was wealth. The more you had, the more power you had, but the more land you needed, the more water you needed. I remember teaching Plato's Republic, and Socrates says very clearly, they ask him about food, and he says, well, if we want to eat meat, we'll have to go to war. They knew that like 2,500 years ago, they were talking about that. So this has been the thing. So we have this wealthy elite class that emerged, and the word capital, which we get our word capitalism from, means head, as a head of sheep and goats and cows. And so then they invented another institution, war. There had never been war before, but once you have a bunch of animals that you own and you need land and water for them, and then you have another king with a lot of animals and land, and then you start having these wars over capital. And that's what war has always been. It's the way the rich get richer, is you go to war. The oldest word for war that we know of, gavya, the ancient Sanskrit word, it means literally the desire for more cows. That's what it means. So we had the arising of war as a way for the wealthy to get wealthier and have more power, but that led straight to the next thing that we still have more of now than we've ever had, which is human slavery. human trafficking and slavery, because again, what I've seen, and we talk about this in the World Peace Diet, whatever we've done to animals, sooner or later we've done the same thing to each other. So it's a small step from owning the animals to owning human beings, impregnating them against their will, stealing their babies, selling them on the market. So we had the arising of slavery for the first time. And then that also led to the fifth one, which is basically the domination of the sacred feminine, the domination of women, because the whole mentality that emerged, and this is the worst part of animal agriculture, I think, is that you have to impregnate these animals against their will and steal their babies and kill them and impregnate them again. So it's this rape and kill operation. This sexual abuse of animals by the millions every day is not only devastating to them, but what does it do to us to be in a society where that's happening? And we're causing, we take out our wallets and we vote for that. I mean, I always like to remind everybody that we do actually get to vote. We have ballots. And these ballots really get counted. Right? So what the heck, let's vote. But when we're voting for meat, dairy, and eggs, we're voting for this sexual abuse and other terrible other abuse and imprisonment and killing of other beings. That's really the crime right there, is paying for it. But then we don't stop there. We turn around and we eat it, right? We actually eat the terror and fear and pain and despair and anxiety and sexual abuse and everything else. And we build this beautiful temple that the only one we get for this lifetime with bricks of misery and violence. And we, how is that possible? How is it possible that we're so unconscious that we continue with this whole thing? That's like, how is it possible? I mean, it's so clear that this is satanic. I mean, obviously, it's just the opposite. I used to teach college courses in comparative religion. The essence of every religion is the same. They say, whatever you most want for yourself, give that to others. It's the golden rule. It's just, that's the core of every teaching. Don't do to others what you wouldn't want to have done to yourself. The other main teaching, the second main teaching, is whatever you sow, you will reap. Whatever you put out, it's going to come back. And yet we think we can live here in this highly intelligent, computerized, industrialized society that we're so proud of, dominating everything, and just ignore these fundamental universal principles and wreak absolute misery, terror, fear, pain, disease, and violence on billions of animals every single day, if we count marine animals, billions every day, and get off scot-free, and we can build a society of freedom and peace and justice and health for us, while we are destroying that for them. It's never going to work. And no one's talking about it, really. I mean, why don't we hear about this on the news? And in every single problem that we have, that we read about in the newspapers and hear about in the news, if you look carefully, it's not that difficult to see it. We are inflicting it on animals. All the different types of diseases, all the obesity. Obesity is a great one. It never goes down. It keeps going up. Every year, we have more and more people obese. With all these people working to try to stop the obesity epidemic, it just keeps going up. Well, what are we doing to animals? They're sold by the pound. You can't get more gross in materialism than buying and selling living beings by the pound. How would we like it if someone came along and said, well, you have a beautiful looking dog, how about $6 a pound? We'd say, no, I care about that animal. So we're selling these beings by the pound. So there's whole armies of scientists who are working to try to maximize weight gain in cows and pigs and chickens through feeding, through genetic engineering of their whole bodies. I mean, they're turned into, it's terrible what we do to them. But the point is we're sowing seeds of maximizing obesity in others, and we get an obesity epidemic. We maximize osteoporosis in these poor cows and hens because we suck so many eggs and milk and other things out of their bodies and the minerals, and so their bones are breaking all the time, these downer cows and these poor hens, and we get an osteoporosis epidemic, and we sow cancer. I mean, these poor animals are living in filth, they're eating toxic food, and we find we get cancer, we're eating toxic food. We break down their families, we find our families getting broken down. Everything we do comes boomeranging back. You have all these people talking about these problems that we're having and how difficult it is to solve them, and no one makes that connection. And I think there's this massive blind spot is really the defining reality of our generation, of our human beings at this time, because the animal agriculture has become so vast and pervasive and it permeates everything, and everything it touches, it harms. It erodes our health, the health of ecosystems, the health of our society, our psyches, our spirituality. It all gets harmed because it's based on turning beings into objects, turning a living being into, learning to look with eyes that when I see a being, I just see a hot dog. You know, that, if another species came here and did that to us, we would know how insane that is. But since we're doing it to them, we don't think about it. And the thing is, it's not like I have any interest in blaming anyone or criticizing anyone, in the sense that we're all just following orders. That's the thing. You know, we're born here. We don't get up in the morning and think, gosh, you know, I want to cause a chicken to suffer today. You know, we think, I got to get to work. I'll stop by Kentucky Fried Chicken, grab something, and get to work on my latest project. So we're just unconscious. We don't think about where our money's going and what it's doing. And it's that unconsciousness. That's what Carl Jung said. He said that the problem with humanity is that people are hopelessly unconscious. I mean, it's really true. So the good news is that at a certain point, we're going to start getting more conscious, right? We've got to. And when it gets maybe painful enough, we begin to get more conscious. A lot of people go vegan because they get so sick, they got to do something different. Some people, it's they somehow spiritually, they suffer enough, they say, I'm not going to cause suffering. So I think we're entering a stage now where it's, you know, it's like do or die, in a sense. We need to absolutely transform our society. But that's the underlying idea, is really that there's no reason to blame or criticize or shame people who are eating animals still. That it has a massive amount of momentum. It has 10,000 years of cultural momentum has gone into this. And so it's gathered momentum through the ages, in all our religious institutions, our governmental institutions, our economic institutions, our educational institutions. Everything is permeated by the mentality of animal agriculture. And it's a mentality of the strong dominating the weak. So this, I think, really is the challenge we have today. And I think the good news is that each one of us as an individual has enormous power. Each one of us as an individual can say, all right, how do I respond to this situation? How do I respond? Every morning we can wake up and go, how do I respond to this? And it is open to the inner guidance, the inner wisdom that we have that comes from our compassion and our awareness and being conscious, how we can contribute to the solution. Because we're only on this earth for a few short years. You know, it goes by very quickly. We tend to think like, oh God, I'll be here forever, you know. But I remember, you know, I've been vegan, Mel and I have been vegan for a long time. I've been, you know, since 1980, right? Now it's actually 44 years. But I remember in the early days of veganism, in a way it was a lot better because there wasn't all this vegan junk food. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to be a vegan, you know, all you, it was like beans and veggies and fruits and that's it. You know, you just went to the store and bought stuff and made it. And we thought it was so great. Now we have vegan ice cream, we have vegan butter and vegan cheese and vegan hot dogs and vegan burgers. And the more delicious it is, usually the more toxic it is. They put all kinds of stuff in it. And we have billionaires investing in it. And now people are going vegan and saying, oh, I just love being vegan. The food is so good. And then after a year, they go, oh, I tried being a vegan, man. It's terrible. I'm so sick. I need to eat some meat again now. I mean, that's what's happening. You know, really, it's happening. So it's important to protect the integrity of our movement, I think. It's under a lot of attack from different angles. So it's really important to keep the spirit alive of veganism as, I think, in a sense of minimalism. I mean, I love it. You know, we're living in that little van for 5 months. It's 5 feet by 7 feet by 39 inches. It's like, you know, we're learning about chickens in battery cages. I got a pretty girl today, so I don't mind. But the basic idea is that we tend to just see ourselves that the more we, as a society, the more we can consume, the happier we'll be. The more we consume, the more we're honored. You know, the most honored people who are basically running things, the World Economic Forum and so forth, these are the people that fly around in their own private jets and have the largest environmental footprint than anyone, and we look up to them and let them run things. They're running the governments. They're running everything with their money, because money buys power and power buys influence. I understand this. You know, my father wanted to be a doctor. It's so interesting. You know, I was born and raised in Concord, Massachusetts, and he wasn't a doctor. I said, so how come you're not a doctor? He said, well, I was a medic in World War II, and I said, I didn't like it. I didn't like what I saw, and I really didn't like. They had these long lines of soldiers would come, and my job was to give them all a shot in the arm. And he said, you know, if I were you, I would just do my best to stay away from doctors. And I've been following his advice. And the last time I went to a pharmaceutical, to a drugstore for anything, or to a doctor. It was when I was in college, in the early days. I was in college in 1972, or something like that. So we're looking at about 50 years. And people say, gosh, how is it possible? You've never gone to a drugstore for anything. You've never been to a doctor in 50 years. And I say, it's easy. I haven't had a television in 50 years. Because really, television is really, I think, very toxic. It's controlled. It's a program. It's programmed. But anyway, so my father wasn't a doctor, but then what he did, so I learned from him, I don't trust the medical establishment too much. And then what he did become was he bought a newspaper. So I learned, don't trust the media. I was raised in it. And I could see directly, he was very successful. He had one paper. By the time I was in college, he had 13 newspapers in the Boston area. And, but I learned, him talking to my mother, well, we can't run this article because so-and-so advertiser wouldn't like it. They pull their ads, you can't. So I understand very in my bones to not trust the media, because I understand that anything you see on the newspaper, reading the newspaper, see on TV or hear on the radio, is only there because the advertisers are happy with it. As soon as the advertisers don't like it, and who are the biggest advertisers? The fast food industry, the pharmaceutical, medical complex, the petroleum industry, the bankers. Now, they want to make sure that we get a narrative that keeps us buying what they want us to buy. And so that's a huge issue. So we have to gather here in this some kind of anonymous house and really get the news, right? Because we're not going to get it. And that's the problem. Most people are bathing. They're marinating in lies. They're marinating in endless deception. The biggest deception is food, that we need to imprison and sexually abuse animals to be healthy, when it's the opposite. Here I am, and now I'm in my early 70s, and I'm sure I can be just as healthy, probably much healthier than the people my age, or probably a lot younger. And so we don't lose anything by being compassionate and kind to animals. We actually gain in health. I think it's important, as Madeline likes to emphasize, that we eat food that is whole, organic, plant-based, and as much as possible local, into the macrobiotic principle that we've been talking about. And so what we did, we lived in an RV for 17 years, and then we finally got a little piece of land and a little house up in Northern California. We have a half an acre, we have a quarter acre food forest, but we have about 75 or so, 76 trees, fruit and nut trees, and a lot of raised beds and vegetables. So Madeline's really so excited that we're on Sunday, we're going to be back after 5 months, and there's going to be all these greens and all this stuff. We can just start eating our own food. But it's such a beautiful thing to love the earth or have the earth love us back with food, because that's how it is. You plant one seed, and you get thousands of seeds and fruits, and there's this beautiful generosity and love and cooperation with the seasons and with everything. And it's a very benevolent, beautiful, abundant relationship we can have with the earth, and that's what we feel. We work in harmony with the soil. We build up the soil. We work with the mice, all the networks, the fungal networks, and the birds and the pollinators and all this, and we create this little heaven, And the food comes pouring out of that. We get nectarines. We have extra. We can sell it at the farmer's market. It's this wonderful thing. And if you look at animal agriculture, it's the opposite. It was always men's work. The animals wanted to be free. No, we're going to confine you. We're going to sexually abuse you, steal your babies. I mean, it's been violence from the very beginning. The animals are always resisting, and so we were just dominating them. And now we do plant agriculture as a society pretty much the same way we do animal agriculture. We use pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, monocropping. It's the same mentality, and it causes toxic food and poisons everyone, which is what they want. That's where the money is. There's no money. Their worst nightmare is people like me and Madeline and Cascio who haven't gone to a doctor in 50 years. The whole system would collapse, and good, it should collapse. But once we begin, I think, to really understand that it's very important to be proactive in taking responsibility for our health, and taking responsibility for the quality of our information that we're getting, and taking responsibility for the quality of the relationships that we're in. These are really important. Taking responsibility for really the quality of our lives, the work we're doing, all these things. We are called to take responsibility for all those things, and we're taught from the time we're little kids not to. We're taught to go to authorities and experts and let them do it. Let them take care of it. Go to the doctor and let him take care of your health, right, or her. Or go to the drugstore, let them give you something. That's a sure way to be really sick. And it's the same thing with everything else. Let them take care of your money. Let them take care of your, information. So being proactive and really questioning things, that's the key, I think. And the other thing I started saying, I just wanted to get back to, is how quickly our life goes by. And they were talking to the oldest living human being a while back. I saw this on the internet. A woman from Japan who was 119 years old, and they asked her, what's it like to be 119? And she thought for a minute and she said, it went by so fast. That's the thing, our life is fleeting, and that's why it's beautiful. That's why it's beautiful. Flowers and sunsets and children are all beautiful because it's just fleeting. And so our lives are beautiful because they're fleeting. So every day is a gift where we can bring something to be part of the solution rather than just being part of the problem and consuming and destroying, taking out our wallet and voting for death and destruction. We can vote. And that's the beautiful thing. Instead of just criticizing the system that's violent and ridiculous, we actually have this wonderful alternative, right? We can eat these foods were fantastic. We can create a positive future, and there's nothing stopping us. The only thing that's stopping us as a society from creating this positive future is fear. It's the only thing. People are afraid to be different. The main thing driving everything is the underlying feeling of people just wanting to comply, go along with the group and go along with the authorities. These are the two main things. I want to be like the authority, like the group, and education system does one thing. It drums into us more than anything. If you want to get ahead in the world, if you want to be successful, you better do what the authorities tell you. That's the main thing. Please the authorities. And that's a recipe for disaster, because the authorities now, we don't want to please them. We need to trust our own inner authority, the inner authority that we have when we connect with our spiritual essence, which is what we are, which is infinite and eternal consciousness that was never born and will never die. That's what we are. This body is not what we are. And we know that. As vegans, we see that. When we see a cow or a pig or a chicken, we see that she or he is more than just that thing that's being sold by the pound. There's a being in there with interests, with awareness, who has a purpose. And we honor that, so we respect them, and that out of that comes kindness. And so the reason we do this to animals is because we've lost it in ourselves as a society. We've lost our purpose, we've lost our self-respect. We see ourselves as an object that was born and will die. We're taught that by this materialistic science which is a bunch of lies. And so we really need to question everything. And the beautiful thing is, I think people are doing it. So maybe I'll say just one more thing, and then we can open up for your questions. The one more thing I want to say, I want to see what time it is now here. Okay, maybe I'll keep this brief. It's just the idea of community, because I think that's the key. The key idea is that the only reason anybody eats animal foods is because of the communities we're raised in, right? And the communities we're in. We're products of our communities. As little kids, we're just like a little sponge. We soak up everything. Their attitudes become my attitudes. Their food becomes my food. So if we can create alternative communities of freedom and health and joy, then we can help move people in that direction. And that's what's happening. I think most people go vegan because they're influenced by an alternative community, like a Veg Fest or a vegan restaurant, or like a vegan spirituality group. I went away to college in Maine, and I ended up walking from there. I was going to try to go to California. I thought, if I can get to California, I'll attain cosmic consciousness. I was like, my younger brother, we thought we walked from Massachusetts We headed out to California with no money, just meditating. We're walking to California, like sadhus of India, 1975. We did, and we got as far as Buffalo.
That's funny.
And in Buffalo, I remember it was freezing, and we just said, well, forget going west, let's just head south.
Yeah.
We can keep ahead of the cold front, it was in October. So we walked about 20 miles a day, every day, just walking south down through upstate New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, into Tennessee. Eventually we got there to Tennessee. Amazing experiences, but we were just still meditating, and we ended up at this community called The Farm. And The Farm in 1975 was the largest hippie commune in the world, and they were mostly from California. And they had 900 people, and they said, we're vegetarians. And they were actually vegans, but no one knew the word vegan in 1975, so vegetarians, but they didn't eat meat or dairy or eggs or honey, or, they really were practicing basically a vegan way of living back then. And they had about 200 children that were vegan from birth. They were all thriving. So I said, so why are you guys doing this? Why are you being vegetarian? And the guy I was talking to said, well, the main reason is most of the food we're growing, we're not feeding it to people who are starving. We're feeding it to these cows and pigs and chickens, and they are very wasteful. And so we're eating lower in the food chain, so there's enough for everyone to eat. So we can stop having war and hunger and conflict and all this stuff. And I said, that's great. What a great idea. Because they said we can feed everyone on a fraction of the land. And then the other reason he said was, this guy I was talking to, he said, do you know what the animals go through that people are eating? And I said, I don't want to hear about it. But he told me anyway. He just told me a little bit of the hyper-confinement and the mutilation and the terrible things that we do to these animals by the millions. And so it was kind of like when Toto pulls the curtain back, and you see what's really happening in Oz. That was kind of the feeling. I didn't know what's really happening here in this world. We're just slaughtering millions of animals, hyper-confining, abusing them, eating it, and we just pretend. But what made it so beautiful and poetic and powerful was that we were eating together. 900 people were making these big meals, big hippie pots of, rice and soy and veggies and everything. We were eating. It was good. I mean, I was learning. It was like, it takes a learning, But that was the great thing, was that I was learning how to do it with them in the community. And so I've never eaten meat in my life since that day in 1975 when I talked to that guy and said, okay, that's it. And I found out when I met Madeline years later that she also, as a young Swiss artist over there in Switzerland, also had never eaten meat in her life again either. And we've been linked up ever since, I think, psychically. We've been married now 30 years.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I say the smartest thing I ever did besides going vegan was marrying Madeline. Tremendous, wonderful partner. But anyway, a few years later, I got out to California. I was living in these meditations, Tibetan Buddhist and then Zen centers in the Bay, San Francisco area. And then I decided to shave my head and become a Zen Buddhist monk. And so I was over there in South Korea living in this monastery, and I was living in a monastery that had been practicing veganism for 750 years.
Wow.
That was it. I mean, since the 1200s.
Wow.
In Songwon-sa, there was no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, no silk, no leather. I mean, no honey, none of that. It was really and even mosquitoes or insects, you try to wouldn't step on them, wouldn't kill them. Just try to practice what's called ahimsa, which is nonviolence. To live that. And we were getting up at 2:30 in the morning. We were meditating from 3 o'clock till 9 o'clock at night in silence, for months at a time. And so it was very rigorous training, but I could see that the underlying reason that people were living this way was because they were cultivating the internal life. They were cultivating their connection with the eternal dimension of consciousness, which is what we are. And when we do that, when we connect with the eternal dimension, we realize that there's one life living through everyone. It's one life living through all of us. We're not separate fundamentally. We're all related, all living beings. And when we understand it, when we see that and understand that, then there's a whole sense of kindness and compassion for each other. It's like we're all fingers on the same hand. Why are you saying, well, I'm taller than you, or we're part of the same expression. And so, to me, this is where it's very important to understand that veganism and spirituality are absolutely one. Authentic spirituality requires us to see the interconnectedness of all life. When we see the interconnectedness of all life, then we naturally live our lives as expressions of kindness and respect, because the other is not other, the other is us. But we live in a society that's based on the opposite of that. It's based on what Satanism is, which is harming others without any compunction. Like, well, I'm going to use you, and I'll do it. I mean, that's what our society is based on. And so it's not our fault. We've been born into a satanic cult, basically. And in fact, it was so funny when I gave a lecture at one time. You remember that in Missouri? There was a woman there and at one point it was a whole week-long retreat. And then she said at the end, she said, "I want to go vegan." And she said, "I want to talk to you. I knew I was raised in a satanic cult in New Orleans, but I had repressed the memories." And then she said she started remembering some of these repressed memories during the retreat. And she said, "I want to tell you." I said, "I don't want to hear." And she said, "Well, one of the main things we did was the adults made us as children kill animals. That's one of the things they made the kids do. And then not only kill them, but eat them." And so I thought, that's pretty much what I went through. I mean, I didn't have to kill them, but they killed them and made me eat them. Yeah. It's a satanic cult. We're born into something really dark. And we have to just, have compassion for each other. Like, this is something that was going, and here it is. We need to transform this and not ever go along with any of it. And once we understand that it's something that's been going through, and it causes war and conflict, but it creates a tremendous power structure of a few that control the institutions. And then liberate ourselves, and we can just give thanks every morning that, gosh, I have another day, I'm liberated, I'm out of that prison. And then do the best we can to share these ideas with other people. Share these ideas with other people in ways that are uplifting, that are illuminating, that help them. Shaming, blaming, criticizing, making people wrong, like, I'm right, I'm a vegan, you're not right, that's not nearly as effective as actually doing it in a kind and loving way. And speaking our own truth. Gandhi said, Satyagraha is the way. I think that's true. Satyagraha means truth, power. Speaking our own truth. I'm so happy I realized the only reason I was eating animal foods all those years I did was because I was just following orders. Now I'm not doing it anymore, and it's fantastic. And don't say anything else, because that's the truth for everyone we ever meet who's eating animal foods. That's the same story. We all have the same story. The only reason anyone eats animal foods is because of the communities we're in. We're following orders. They just came in as soon as we're born. We're just doing it. So when we say, instead of saying, well, the only reason you're eating animal foods is because you're, they're already like, well, leave me alone. But if we say, I realized the only reason I was eating animal foods, I was just following orders. I'm not doing it anymore, and it's great. You just planted a little seed of liberation that their own wisdom and compassion will start to water, and then they'll go vegan eventually, because nobody wants to just be following orders that are terrible, harming them and harming the world. And so I think that's the thing. It's for us as a movement to mature spiritually and become more conscious, so that we're planting seeds skillfully, so that we're living this. Like Walt Whitman said, he wrote a poem called Song of the Open Road, where he said, I and mine, we do not convince by arguments, we convince by our presence. I think that's a really beautiful thought, because people always say, well, how can I get to this guy and say something that will make him change? It's like, it's who we are. When we're living this, when we're happy and healthy and loving and kind and respectful, people they want to become like that. So I think our movement can move in that direction. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much, everyone, for your kind attention. And